Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Thanks for joining me here on the program. It is good to see you. We've made it. We're all alive still. I don't know if we talked about it here on the show, but Mark Halperin, journalist, I would say he's more right-leaning now after getting canceled. He does a show called Two Way on YouTube. And he was on Tucker Carlson, which surprised me. And he was talking about how if Trump wins, it could be the greatest mental health crisis in the country. And I just, before going to air here, saw that there was this massive spike into suicide hotlines. People have committed suicide over this. Oh my gosh. I just want to say to you, like, things may be different. Things may be good. Things may be bad. You can't know that it's all going to be bad. And I think you should definitely reach out and get help if you are struggling in this time. But please, do not kill yourself over Donald Trump or politics. And I think that's the worst part about this election. This, I think, more than any other election that I've seen, has made both sides feel that it's existential, that it is life or death for my team to win. And we reject that sort of thinking here. You lived through the first Trump administration. You will live through this one. There's going to be really bad stuff, and there's going to be some good stuff. And politics has had this effect on people that I hate. And I think my main reason for not liking Donald Trump is that effect. It really encourages bullies. It makes bullies feel empowered. And you saw it almost immediately on election night. You're going to see it for 4 more years. And that he uses his position to wit people up. Like, when you have a microphone in front of you, you have a power to treat people with respect, dignity, and love. And he doesn't have that ability. And the Democrats, I think, are also equally as guilty at this, saying, wife going to die, is asking these very real, legitimate questions, but telling people that if your team loses the presidency, that there's going to be millions of deaths across the country, I think is like a really evil messaging. And it doesn't make you the good guys. And that is, I think, one of the reasons. So I have a lot of problems with Barack Obama, as you can imagine. Barack Obama, we talked during the conventions about how Barack Obama brought this level of hope and he just had that thing that sucks you in and makes you feel inspired. And then once you look at his policies as a libertarian anyways, I'm like, no thanks. But he also has this lectury, talking down to regular people type vibe that he and Michelle brought to this election that I think really hurt the Democrats. And it made me really not miss the Obama era, because it was constantly being told, here's why you're wrong, and here's how grandma's going to die, and here's how. And so I hope one of the messages, and I don't expect anybody to learn any lessons out of this election. I don't expect anybody to learn a single thing from having their butt kicked at the ballot box. I don't expect anybody to change any behavior of any kind. I think we're going to do the exact same thing for the next 4 years that we've continued to do. But I would hope that Democrats learn from this, that maybe the Obama era style of politics, where everything is existential, bred an existentialism in the GOP, that the Tea Party was a reaction to the Obama years and the rhetoric, which I forget which election it was, but it was literally like, your grandma's going to eat cat food and your uncle's going to be pushed down the stairs because they don't have health care. Like, it just constant, just worst case scenarios. And I guess you can win elections through fear. Obviously, it works. We just had a fear-based candidate win in a landslide. But Americans, I think, are really hungry for a brighter morning, for something more positive that makes people feel some hope. I think that's why you see a lot of people turning to Trump, because if you look at the campaign messaging of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, when she was doing really well, started out with freedom and hope and we've got this and we're all in it together and unity. And then when that they just lost the discipline of it and ended up at Trump is Hitler and he's a fascist and he is now look, we'll get to that later. I think the thing about Trump that is interesting is that people don't hear I think Donald Trump is a fascist, they hear you are a fascist. He's a master at turning criticism of Trump and making his people internalize it, which is a problem. It gets blamed on the messenger, but there's also the message and the messenger, but sometimes the hearer also needs to do some critical thinking. But the end of that campaign with Trump is an existential threat and women are all going to die didn't work. So let's just scrap that. And I think that's why Bernie Sanders has had, over the last few days, like a resurgence. You're starting to see Bernie Sanders clips on Twitter and Instagram and making people realize the magic of the Ron Paul movement and the Bernie Sanders movement and what tilled the ground for the populism of this age. And the Ron Paul movement, I think, helped till the ground for the Trump right-wing populism. Bernie Sanders has, and this loss will increase the populism of the left. And you totally understand that calculation because you have a Democrat that never got a vote, a single primary vote, was not selected by the voters, and was pushed down everybody's throats by the elites, by the Nancy Pelosi's and Barack Obama's of the world and Chuck Schumer's, and got her butt kicked. She lost. This chart keeps going around of Biden's 81 million votes, and she's got 14 million less votes, and she's on par with Hillary Clinton. And I think that doesn't prove that the elections were stolen or anything like that. First, you have to understand they probably are just now getting done counting ballots. So that total is going to change for even maybe a few more days. But it shows how many people just stayed home. And so Republicans keep pushing this as if this is some sort of evidence of an election being stolen. But you've just spent an entire election cycle talking about her $60,000 necklaces and nobody likes her. Why would anybody take her seriously? That resonated. Because when people said, I can't afford groceries, I don't feel like I'm doing that well. When Joe Biden's numbers are, let's see, what is his approval rate? It's 39%. 39% of people approve of what he's doing. That is lower than Trump at a lot of points in his presidency, including during COVID. And wrong track is 75%. So the Democrats said, what we ought to do is let's stay on the same track. Okay. All right. If I'm just an independent voter or I'm a center-left voter, and I know I don't like Donald Trump and I don't see him as an option, and you're offering me the same track, can I at least get some technical competency? So if we're going to have a government that is really like the 7th or 8th term of George W. Bush, where we have this neoliberal order where everything revolves around national security and keeping inflation rising a little bit and wages are stagnant, and we have job growth at 2%, and it's not, and wages are, and you have globalization, and you have forever wars, you have all these different problems that never seem to change, right? Things that George Bush initiated, like central government, big government, No Child Left Behind policy initiatives, Affordable Care Act initiatives that get enacted and then don't actually make real change in people's lives. It's messed up and doesn't actually quite fix the problem it was intended to. Children aren't better educated. Common Core creates things. It creates all kinds of problems. If you remember that whole controversy, and you've got immigration on the rise, and immigration comes in. What that does is it makes people who have, when I was executive director of the Libertarian Party of Indiana, we had in that northern corridor up 31 from Indianapolis to South Bend, 700,000 jobs lost in the 15 years before 2010. That's a tremendous amount of people in a state of 6 million people at the time. You're talking about people that are now competing with immigrants. Okay, they're competing for their jobs. This happened in Europe. So one of the reasons that East Berlin in Germany is turning towards I believe it's the ADP, the more right-wing fascist-leaning party there in Germany, is because the people that live in the complexes where the immigrants were settled have to compete with jobs and never had the economic advantage to catch up to where their West Berliners ever were, right? So it created this stagnation of wages that led to Brexit-like movements and a rejection of immigration. So I don't think that you can, I think we have a tendency on the left and right to blame the other side as if they're somehow propagandized. And I think that's just a huge mistake. I think there's a fair bit of people on all sides that take in misinformation and disinformation and make bad decisions. But if you were to go out and around the state of Indiana and talk to people in Anderson or Springfield, you would have frustration, right? Springfield, Ohio. The wages haven't caught up, and immigrants are competing with their wages. So there's obviously that issue, right? And so nothing ever seems to really get fixed. Nobody ever tries anything. And you have, and I think that's I'll play a clip that I think it articulates it a little bit better from a guy on CNN. But you also have, I think, in the middle class, like this expectation, like I have at 40. My dad was looking at buying his first, second home at this point, right? And I know I'm never going to reach the economic levels that my parents had. The boomers have hoarded so much of the wealth, and they've been in charge since George W. Bush, and they have not followed through on that wealth trickling down. They're getting their Social Security, their 401ks, they're still working, and that they're not allowing for upward mobility for our generation, which, not for nothing, but I graduated high school in the middle of the 9/11 downturn, economic downturn. We graduated college in the middle of the '08 downturn. We hit our prime earning years in the middle of COVID when we're trying to raise our kids. I think there's a tremendous amount of frustration about the economics of our lives in the millennials, in the 40, 45 minus. And actually the biggest group age-wise that voted for Trump was Gen X by far. Kamala Harris won the majority of voters in Z, millennials, and boomers, but Trump got the majority of voters in Gen X, which angsty generation, that Gen X for sure. But you can see, if you think through that lens of people's economic frustration, compounded by 9% inflation at certain points during Joe Biden's administration. And I heard Niall Ferguson say on a podcast that median household income adjusted for inflation under Trump was 2% compound annual growth. Under Biden, it was 0.44%, Obama 0.45%, and Bush was negative 0.22%. Right. And now I tried to fact check that, and I actually went and I asked ChatGPT very specifically, and it came up with much different numbers where from Trump, the wages went from like 55 to 65,000. And then under Biden, it went from 65 to 88,000. So you actually had in one number from the Treasury Department, economic growth for a family's median household income was better under Joe Biden. I could see that being the case because a lot of what Trump did with capital gains tax cuts, which supercharged the economy, finally started to bleed down. And then you had that period, remember, where I wish I had and everyone else had, where they were applying for jobs and they were getting like 3 times their salaries in some cases. So you could see how people hopped up their way into better jobs. And you also have a lot of baby boomers retiring since COVID or being retired since COVID. But like all statistics, who knows what's the truth? But let's say Niall Ferguson is right and median household income adjusted for inflation, 2% under Trump, and everybody else was like 0.44. I can't tell you the amount of family members who said I'm voting for Trump because I was doing better then. It's harder for me to get work now. It's harder for me to get jobs. I don't think, and I think the message of Ron DeSantis tried this, but people didn't believe it, that when you suppress economic supply by making everyone stay home because you put Fauci in charge, and then you increase demand by giving everybody a bunch of free money through PPP and through the personal stimulus checks, that's what caused the inflation. He passed 2 and wrote the 3rd of it. Yeah, I don't know. So is Trump the guy that is going to fix the economy? I follow this stuff closely. I don't think so. I think he's fairly incompetent. The stock market disagrees with me, obviously, and they think he's the guy that can do it, and voters clearly do too. I think there's a bunch of different reasons that he won. Kamala Harris, and if you looked at it and said, I need to make a change, I need to have my economic situation changed. I'm frustrated with the forever wars. I'm frustrated with this and that. And nothing ever seems to change, and it didn't change under Joe Biden, and he made all these promises, and the seas didn't stop rising under Barack Obama. Let's just change our form of government or radically alter our form of government. I'm willing to take that risk. So if Donald Trump makes me wealthy, I'm willing to take the risk that he's not going to leave the office. If that even factored in, right? Like when I talk to friends who live in rural areas, nobody was talking. I was so surprised on election night that the CNN exit polling showed at 35% the most pressing concern of voters was democracy, and second was the economy. Let me see if I can pull that up, that image. But I think the conditioning of a CNN viewer, and even in my first instinct of it, was like, wow, 35%, their motivating vote was because they don't like democracy or they're worried about democracy. But that's like if you just say, are you concerned about democracy? Think about if you're a Trump person. Like, you are worried about democracy. You are worried that you just saw your president, the guy that you like, investigated, had his business mostly destroyed, blah, 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 like all these different lawfare things going on. And you rightly or wrongly view that as an attack on democracy. And then you also have people like me who look at it and go, yeah, this guy can't be president. He tried not to leave last time. He doesn't have any understanding of the Constitution and has no allegiance to it. He's going to grow the size of the executive branch. I don't want that to be done. I want him to do the non-interventionist stuff, but I also, and where can we start to shrink bureaucracy, but it ought to be done constitutionally and responsibly. I don't know. We'll see. If he gets rid of the Department of Education, I'm for it as long as you're sunsetting programs. Democracy, 35%, economy, 31%, abortion, 14%, immigration, 11%, foreign policy, 4%. And as Spike Cohen said on the comment on this picture, 31 at the economy plus 14, I think he meant 14 plus 11 equals 56. So yeah, abortion, what Spike's saying here is like abortion at 14%, if that's your main concern. Like, religious TikToks are like, you can't let Kamala get in there. Because the thing about abortion is it's dead now. Donald Trump doesn't care about that issue. He feels that he has solved that issue. And he has done enough for the right wing with Dobbs. And so that's just going to be a static issue. And it was Kamala Harris who was going to come in and make changes. So if you wanted her to come in and make changes, obviously you're disappointed. But if you're worried that things are going to get worse, that's going to happen at your legislator. It's not good. There's not going to be a federal ban on abortion. I never thought Roe v. Wade would get overturned, but I think we're in a period where you just have to expect the unexpected. But let's look at it this way. Let's say half the people of the 35% are worried about democracy. Most of the people on the economy are going to go Trump's way. Let's say a third of the people on abortion are going to go Trump's way. Immigration is all going to Trump, right? Maybe 1 or 2% of Kamala, and 4% are worried about foreign policy. I'd say 3 of that percent, right? So when you add up who is going to actually make a difference in these top 5 concerns, Donald Trump was the guy that voters looked at and said, he's the one who's actually going to fix it. I'd advise you to go and look at exit polling. Exit polling is a good snapshot because, Pete, they know you have voted because you just walked out and you took a survey. I've done an exit poll before. And it's always very interesting. And look at like local, so Fox News, CNN, I think the New York Times, and a bunch of different, ABC, NBC, they all do exit polling. And you should definitely go check those out because you'll learn a lot about where people were at. And this is the importance of an election. Madison designed this entire system with a lot of elections, county, state, federal, all these different levels of elections, because that's the only true way that you can poll people. And you'd think that in our highly technocratic society that, you know, these farmers need to go to the polls in 1792 to see where they're at on a congressional seat. We're so much more advanced because we have cell phones and mass communication. We're not, because the polls were not even close, right? The article that we brought you, I should have gone with my gut, right? Because my gut in that first preview episode said, I think it's Trump. I just feel like the base of voters are rising. I think there's something to maybe the male vote and him winning over different demographics That's why I went with Trump. But then I let myself get seduced by the nerds and the fantasy baseball of it all. And I was like, I don't know. But I was close. I was the closest of all of us because I said, look, it's going to go either way. It's within the margin of error, and it could just be a landslide for one of these candidates, and who the hell knows? And it ended up being a landslide for Trump. And my map was very close. I obviously got Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, key states, wrong, but all the other states, you just could tell they were going for Trump, which is why I should have thought that maybe those other states were going to swing. But the article that we brought you in that episode about Henry Olsen saying, look, the fundamentals of Trump are there. The base of voters and turnout and participation show that this is going to be a Republican election. And that makes sense because historically an anti-incumbent candidate would win this race, right? So she was in the polling way outperforming where she should have been considering the abysmal track record of the Biden administration. And that was also helped by just the fact that Donald Trump is a convicted felon, accused of a lot of sexual abuse issues, and is just, every day is going to be just some new thing. Today, the hysterical thing is that he had Elon Musk get on the phone with Zelensky when Zelensky called him. I don't care. I'm just not going to spend the next 4 years hyperventilating about those things and what he's broken this norm. I did that the last time. I did my best to try to explain to you why limited government and norms are important. I will continue to do that, but just I'm not going to let it emotionally affect me at all. You just can't. It is what it is. This is my message, and this is what I have told you for years. You cannot control with your mind, feelings, and emotions the actions of any politician, let alone Donald Trump. And he's going to do what he's going to do, and he wildly make huge mistakes that destroy the country. The lives of immigrants are greatly in peril, right? There are bullies get emboldened, racists get emboldened in this time period because of that top-down command culture. I'm not going to tell you that everything's going to be great. I think people need to go into this clear-eyed, wide open, that this guy wants as much power as possible. And that is a terrible impulse because he shouldn't have as much power. We should have limited government to constrain any person that wants that kind of power, whether it's Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, whoever, right? That, I think, is the most disappointing thing about so many libertarians just going, if I can get Ross Ulbricht freed, then I'm going to support Donald Trump. All right. I feel really bad for Ross Ulbricht, and I want him to be freed. But let's just look at this like a voter. How does that help me at all if he gets freed? That isn't anything that's going... Did you see in that top 5 list Ross Ulbricht being freed? No, people want solutions to their economic problems. And this guy is saying, I'm going to put tariffs on everything that comes into the country. We import a lot of chicken. We import a lot of food. And I'm also going to deport people who are here legally by going through all of their paperwork and deport the people who are actually making the food and working in agriculture. I'm a C student in economics in high school, but I can tell you that if you limit labor supply and you increase the price of imports because you don't have the supply, that food prices will go up. So I don't know. We'll figure that out in a different episode. But yeah, I think there is going to be a lot of good and bad, but you have to really focus on your local. You have to focus on you, right? It's a step-by-step process when it comes to political change. You have to be the best you can be. If you want to run for office, you can't just run for office. You need to build a network of friends. You need to, it's like dating, right? If you were sitting here listening to me and going, I can't get a date, I will give you the advice that I heard on this great podcast called Mating Grounds a decade ago by Jeffrey Miller and Tucker Max. You're not getting dates, not because women are mad at you're getting friend zone, blah, blah, blah. It's that you aren't economically secure, you aren't physically fit, you aren't emotionally healthy, you aren't doing the things that you need to do to be a productive member of society. And I took that to heart and started improving myself. And if you compare where I am at now from the beginning of this podcast, right? My life is night and day, right? My network is night and day. My mental health is night and day. My physical health is much better. I can't wait for Robert Kennedy to make me healthy again. I'm looking forward to that. Everything's a work in progress, right? I've got a great family. I've got a loving wife. I'm living the trad dad dream for sure. And that is because I started to take my own life seriously, took hold of it and said, you know what? I'm going to go to therapy and work out these problems because I'm not relating to women the right way. I'm divorced because of me. And I need to not let that happen again, right? So I need to start working out. I need to start eating better. I need to start doing all these things, networking and getting off the TV and getting off the couch and getting out there and being a productive person. And then once you've got your foundation laid, and spiritual, I think is huge, right? My spiritual life is just incredibly important and is, I think, the key to me getting to where I'm at, right? So then once you're out in the world and you're participating in a church, a community group, you have friends, you're building something with people, then maybe start considering to run for a local office. But this idea that we're all just going to sit in our house and doom scroll and tweet our way to having a better world, I think that's bad for your mental health. I do think this election showed that there is far more to messaging and to, how do I put this? Kamala Harris spent $1 billion and had a massive get out the vote effort that we talked about in that last podcast. That didn't matter, right? Jefferson Shreve ran for mayor here in Indianapolis and for 1 million people and spent like $18 million of his own money. It didn't matter. Michael Bloomberg tried to buy the nomination 4 years ago. It didn't matter. Money and get out the vote efforts still are subject to the rules of Marshall McLuhan's good messaging will kill a bad product still, right? You can't market your product if it stinks. People won't buy it, right? So Democrats have to figure out what the product is. They're unfortunately going to go populist left instead of giving people a sane economic alternative on the left that respects people's civil liberties. But the reality is you can't sit there and stew about this stuff. You have to just focus on you, your family, your community, your friends, and stay informed, stay engaged. But you've got to protect your peace, right? If you are really hurting today, I think that you have every right, and it is a good thing that you feel empathy for people who are going to be hurt at the hands of somebody like Donald Trump. He's going to do what he promised to do. And I think if you are concerned about a Trump administration, you're right to be concerned, because I think we went into the first term going, oh, that's just what he says. At least I did. Oh, that's just blah, blah, blah. Like, I take him seriously now. It's not because I got so irritated in the group chat because one of the people's like, you just are bamboozled by the mainstream press. I'm like, I'm not. Don't talk to me like I'm somehow under some spell from the mainstream media. I have a podcast where I rip all of these Trump speeches. I watch what he says. I listen to what he says. I don't like what he says. What he says is actually very troubling. He has this thing where he loves to give enough vagueness and out so him and his supporters go, well, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean to actually shoot Lynn Cheney in the face. You're overreacting. They took it out of context. But it's like, I listen to your words. I think deep down that if Lynn Cheney were shot in the face, you really wouldn't care. Right? That's the thing that they don't understand, is that we know that you know what Trump is and who he is and how he is and what he would be with unchecked power. And it concerns people like me and others that you don't care, that you're just making a deal with that, right, to get cheaper groceries. I think that's definitely one thing that I'm like, I don't know how you like look at this stuff and go, yeah, I'm okay with the president growing his power. I'm okay with the president using the military on citizens. I'm okay with, I don't, there's just something, I'm okay with him using racist rhetoric. And you just don't care, right? Like you go, you can't call everybody a racist and homophobe and blah, blah, blah. But some of you are racist and homophobes. Some of you are actually xenophobic. I'm not saying every Trump supporter is that way. But like people get there, this is a retaliation for calling me racist. I think it's what they don't understand is like if you are a person that is in a minority group of any kind, you go, why are my friends okay with this? And I think a lot of Trump supporters have now built their life where they don't have to deal with that. They don't have to have those conversations. I don't think that leftists do any favors by going, I just don't like your morals, so I'm not going to talk to you anymore. That's not how we actually come to a place of understanding. I have friends all across the political spectrum, all different identities. I'm friends with people that this friend would find this person abhorrent and vice versa. And it's just like an enriching experience, and you should definitely work on that and see for yourself. Just looking through my notes here, things that I've just been thinking the last couple days. Yeah, for all the talk about how the media propagandizes the public, they couldn't push Kamala through with $1 billion, right? So I think there are some outdated things that we've been saying, especially on the right since 2017, that aren't going to make a lot of sense anymore. I think this was ultimately about economics. It's the economy, stupid. Right. I think that is the fundamental message of this. And then there's a bunch of like little other motivations that led to the coalition that Trump put together. And freedom of speech, I think, is one of them. I've never used the word woke on this podcast. That whole concept of woke and being against it and protecting women's sports. And I don't want my daughter to have to be in a school gym with a biological male. And I think these were definitely a lot of contributing factors for some people. There's the economic voter, there's the pro-life voter, there is the culturally right voter that all fit into this coalition, which spoke to especially men from a lot of different perspectives that kind of led to this. And he did what we talked about in that last podcast. The person is going to win who can white women turn out for Kamala versus men, and specifically black and Hispanic men who would have voted Democrat last time. Can he convert enough of those people? And he certainly did to actually get it done. But I think we need to be suspect of like this, that what used to be talked about as the cathedral, right? The cultural left is this all-powerful Borg that is assimilating everything in our culture. And I think that has definitely been, if it ever existed, it has been pushed back. I always have said on this show that things are going to swing back and forth. You're going to have now the right go too far. Icarus will fly too high and get too confident about this election, and their wings will melt a little bit, and then it will swing back a little bit more, right? I think we're going to have this back and forth where I could see us having a long string of one-term presidents, right? So we had Trump and then Biden and then Trump, and presumably he will not be. And presumably Donald Trump will not be president again, but we'll see. And then after Trump, maybe it swings to a Democrat and we have President AOC, and then it swings to a term of President J.D. Vance, right? Who knows? I think we have to be prepared for just all of the unexpected turns. There will be elections, no matter what Obama and Elon Musk say. There will be elections. Do not worry. We will still have elections. And I'm just thankful that this was the most secure election of all time and literally no voter fraud. It is amazing to me how we went from massive voter fraud to no voter fraud. Actually, it's not amazing at all. So let's hear a little bit about the breakdowns. This is Harry Enton on CNN giving us an idea of the swings.
Holy Toledo. All right. Trump gained ground in 49 states and the District of Columbia compared to 2020. I went back through the record books. When was the last time a party gained in so many different places? You have to go all the way back to 1992 when Bill Clinton improved upon Michael Dukakis's performance in 49 states, plus the District of Columbia. The bottom line is no matter where you looked on the map, Kate Baldwin, no matter where you looked, Donald Trump was improving on where he did 4 years ago, except for Washington State. It is no wonder that at this particular point, he looks like he's going to be the first Republican to win the popular vote since George W. Bush back in 2004.
And to pull that off, he gained ground with groups that Republicans do not generally count as part of their winning coalition, or really at all. How much ground did he gain?
Yeah, holy Toledo. It's just like, oh, my goodness gracious. These are the types of groups that you would never have thought that Donald Trump would have gained so much support among 8 years ago when he first won against Hillary Clinton. Trump's was the best GOP showing among 18 to 29-year-olds in 20 years. You have to go all the way back to 2004. How about among black voters? It was the best performance for a Republican candidate for president in 48 years since Gerald Ford back in 1976. And among Hispanic voters, the exit polls only go back since 1972. But Donald Trump's performance on Tuesday was the best for a Republican presidential candidate in exit poll history. He literally goes all the way back through history and breaks history. This is what we're talking about, Kate Baldwin. Groups that you never thought that Donald Trump would do well among, even for a Republican candidate, that is what he did. If the 2016 election was about Donald Trump breaking through with white working class voters, this election was about breaking through and going to that Democratic coalition and tearing it apart.
And it wasn't just this, what he did for his own support. It trickled down to helping the Senate and helping in the House.
Yeah, a lot of talk this morning and this week is the GOP is going to have a Senate majority. We don't know if the Republicans are going to have a House majority, but we think that's the most likely to be the case. But I want you to look at the 2024 House GOP national vote showing. So this is the House popular vote. Currently, the GOP is ahead by 5 points. I expect that to shrink a little bit as some of the California results come in. But that, if let's just say he wins, the House GOP wins by more than 2.6 points, it will be the best House GOP showing in a presidential year in the House popular vote since 1928. If there's any viewer out there who is that old, God bless you. But the bottom line is it was probably the best House GOP national vote showing during most of our viewers' lifetimes.
There are
in a presidential year.
Yeah, okay. It's good to see you, Harry. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. And I don't know why that guy says 1928. That makes me feel old. But just to give you an example or more context to how big this election was for Republicans, the Republicans have the presidency, the Senate, most likely the House. It's possible at this point. The majority of state legislatures and a majority of the Supreme Court appointed by a Republican president. The last president with this advantage was Franklin Roosevelt in 1936. 1936. So that is a significant repudiation of the last 4 years, and it is an indication of the country moving rightward, which is also a confirmation of what I've talked about for a long time, which is that this country is, especially the younger generation moving, the idea of being a Catholic integralist, where you want to basically be, or like a Presbyterian theonomist, look those things up, but that's basically Christian government, right? Christian nationalist strains. That's very attractive to young men, right? There is a conservatism that is creeping in amongst men. I don't even know if it's conservatism. It's traditionalism, maybe the better word, or at least a spoken traditionalism, but then maybe not a lived traditionalism. But if you look at men, for instance, look at research on dads. Like the average dad in my dad's generation barely spent time with his kids. My dad always joked about how he had changed 2 diapers. And my mom said that's not a joke. He literally only ever changed 2 diapers. I've changed 2 today. Like I work from home so I can be more present with my kids. Every generation of dads, I think from the greatest generation to boomers to now millennials, for instance, has gotten better and more involved in their kids' lives and more focused on the family unit as time has gone on, right? And I think that's a cultural counterbalance to I don't know, I guess if you grew up with a workaholic dad like I did, I wished he had been there more. So I want to do that. I want to be there for my kids more. I have a great dad. That's no criticism of my dad. He was working on building a great business. And I'll tell you, since having a family, I don't have that drive to be like the next Elon Musk. I want to be a great dad because I know at my funeral, that's what's going to matter, that I'm going to be a dad, right? But I do think there lurks in the heart of many of these men who have like very mundane lives, who maybe don't have kids or who are just not getting dates. There's this appeal to, I think the masculine appeal is like the great man of history. In history, this is a concept of like you really have to have, you can only have Winston Churchill fight Adolf Hitler. He is destined, Winston Churchill was destined to be a part of this fight, and you couldn't have won World War II without that man. And he is a commanding man on the scene. Donald Trump is this guy, and Elon Musk. They are changing history in our time. And there's some truth to that. Obviously, these 2 astronauts in space are coming back in February because Elon Musk is a space pioneer, right? And creating electric cars that have gone from a joke, and the documentary Who Killed an Electric Car in 2006 to now being a very regular part of the American driving scene. There's a Joe Rogan who is a Renaissance man. He's having these interesting conversations with famous people, and 2/3 of the voters watch his podcast with Donald Trump. I think that's like an actual number too, by the way. He had like 50 million views on it, and there's 100-some million voters, right? And he's also a UFC guy and a comedian. And there's this appeal of, even if I am stuck at my boring job and I'm not doing anything interesting, at least I'm on their team while they go out there and kick ass, and Hulk Hogan and blah, blah, blah. I think that's some of the appeal. And there's also societal pressure. If you are not a Trump supporter and you are on the right in the libertarian movement now, I can't tell you what my inbox looks like. And I just see how Chase Oliver got treated this year, and is Michael Malice. Literally, you don't want to be called homophobes, but then you tweet out really homophobic stuff and then go, why am I being called a homophobe? It's for being a homophobe, right? You are hating Chase Oliver because of his sexuality. It doesn't make Michael Malice a good person. It makes him a bad person. It makes him a cruel bully. I just have seen what he's gone through, and I think it's abysmal. And if you're not a Trump guy and you're not in the trad life and you're on the right, the pressure is really a lot like high school. And I think that's what like Trump people don't get, is that even if you are not like treating people that way, it is a regular feature of a person's life. I got an email from a listener the other day saying, how do I deal with my boss gloating and just being really rude to me? He has authority over me and he's treating me like a jerk. And I just want him to stop. I don't support Trump. I voted for Kamala. Like, why is he picking on me? How do I deal with that? Like, how do I deal with the person who pays my salary? And I don't have an answer for you. There's not much you can do. It's just incumbent on the boss to not be a jerk. If you don't understand why people don't like Trump supporters, it's because they regularly have those interactions. And I know that some pink-haired leftist called you a name or something on Twitter, and that I think it's just, you can log off, but you can't log off of your work, right? At least that's my experience. I know if you're listening, you probably don't care, but that's always makes you wonder if they're your friend, right? All right, so let's play the Scott Jennings piece. He is the token Republican over at CNN, and he is talking on election night and gives an explanation for why Donald Trump won.
This is a mandate. He's won the national popular vote for the first time for a Republican, for the first time since 2004. This is a big deal. This isn't backing into the office. This is a mandate to do what you said you were going to do. Get the economy working again for regular working class Americans, fix immigration, try to get crime under control, try to reduce the chaos in the world. This is a mandate from the American people to do that. I think I'm interpreting the results tonight as the revenge of just the regular old working class American, the anonymous American who has been crushed, insulted, condescended to. They're not garbage. They're not Nazis. They're just regular people who get up and go to work every day and are trying to make a better life for their kids, and they feel like they have been told to just shut up when they have complained about the things that are hurting them in their own lives. I also feel like this election, as we sit here and pour over this tonight, is something of an indictment of the political information complex. We've been sitting around here for the last couple of weeks, and the story that was portrayed was not true. I mean, we were told Puerto Rico was going to change the election. Liz Cheney, Nikki Haley voters, women lying to their husbands. Before that, it was Tim Walz and the camo hats. Night after night, we were told all these things and gimmicks were going to somehow push Harris over the line. And we were just ignoring the fundamentals. Inflation, people feeling like that they were barely able to tread water at best. That was the fundamentals of the election. And I think that both parties should always look at the results of an election and figure out what went right and what went wrong. But I think for all of us who cover elections and talk about elections and do this on a day-to-day basis, we have to figure out how to understand, talk to, and listen to the half of the country that rose up tonight and said, we've had enough.
We'll get to the media part, but he echoes something that James Carville said on his podcast, The War Room, and his take on this is that the Democrats lost because they are the party of chaos. They never successfully explained that they were not the party of chaos. You had the Afghanistan withdrawal going south. You had inflation felt like it was out of control. You had the defund the police movement. He said we went wild with identitarian politics. Mayors during COVID just turning the other way. And then you had one of them on the ballot in Tim Walz, where you're just going to let Minneapolis burn. You're so arrogant that you put the governor of Minnesota on the ballot when he failed to protect one of his cities. And women in sports, and it just felt like the world was out of control and chaotic post-COVID. And I don't think you can discount COVID and how important it was in just the way that we're functioning as a society still. And in this election, there's a lot of pent-up resentment amongst people about COVID and vaccine mandates and abortion bans, and it just pushes all of this frustration on all these different sides. But I think you take somebody like Danica Patrick, okay, who's a race car driver, former race car driver, now does TV, out there stumping for Trump. I would never hire her to be a speaker at my Lincoln Day dinner when she's never voted until 2024. But she's indicative of somebody who is just like living life and being a professional and is an adult and does all these things. And then COVID makes her go, wow, government can really hurt me. We didn't see a lot of backlash towards Republicans in 2022 in those midterms. That was like the anti-abortion lashing towards Republicans. But this, I think, was a repudiation of the feeling of chaos, just the feeling that you don't have the ability to stabilize things and get things back on track. It's what we talked about earlier. It's the same track. And you, in Kamala Harris, when you are a swing voter or a Democrat or whatever, and you look at her, you just don't feel confidence. You don't feel that she has competence. And I know it's sexist to call, but like, watch an interview with her. I think Democrats have to be honest with themselves. Joe Biden clearly was failing, and it was so unpopular. And I'd post this on my Instagram and be like, look at this. Oh, you're just posting taken out of context, blah, blah, blah. No, the guy is, watch a press conference. And I'd say, righties, this is how I feel about Trump. Watch a press conference. Take him at his word. I don't like those things. I'm not being bamboozled. I watch Joe Biden and I go, this guy mentally is slipping. He's fading. He cannot be in charge anymore. And Kamala Harris is one of the people that covered that up. And we're constantly told, oh, he's fine, he's fine, he's fine. And then when we get to the debate, everybody's shocked. Just pay attention. Just watch. Everything's on YouTube. Go subscribe to the live Fox Now feed or like NBC News or any of these so you can just see the clips. It's all YouTube feeds you anyways. The man can't do the job, and this woman helped cover it up. So she already has a truth deficit, and we don't want Trump because he's a liar. You're a liar for not being honest with us. And you don't seem to have a grasp of the facts. And you're telling me you're middle class while you're wearing a $8,000 belt and a $60,000 necklace when you're vice president. And you could fix things right now, but you haven't. So I just think Joe Biden is rightly getting crapped on. And I'll explain why via Chris Christie.
Joe Biden made a promise to the American people when I was sitting in this seat 4 years ago. He said, I am a transitional figure. The implication of that, David, was that he was going to serve one term because of his age and he was going to move on. And when he broke that promise, he did two things. One, he broke faith with the people who voted for him. And two, he put his party in an awful position to where they had to replace him when he put on one of the worst debate performances in presidential history, if not the worst. And so Kamala Harris had to inherit all of that. Like it or not, that's what she had to inherit, and she had to overcome it. And it appears, at least tonight, that she's not going to be able to do that. So every candidate deserves some measure of blame anytime there's a loss. But I would say this, that Joe Biden should be looking in the mirror tonight and thinking about what did he do? What did his lack of keeping his word on that central promise from 2020 do to this election tonight? Joe Biden made a promise.
Now, why would Joe Biden do that? And this is the problem for Democrats, is that the media, the political media does not, they have been so focused on Trump for so long that they don't hold Democrats accountable and ask hard questions. Can you cognitively serve in this office. And through the election campaign, she's not doing interviews. We're just going to give her a break. Like Donald Trump's out there. Donald Trump never gets a break. And a lot of that is earned, believe me. But I'd like to see the same scrutiny. And I've always said this, like Donald Trump is great because it exposes how everything actually works. He is corrupt. The media is biased around him. Like he is going to use the office to enrich himself like he did last time. And he's going to use his hotel to make money. And if you want a pardon, you got to pay through Rudy Giuliani $1 million. You've got to do all these different things. Use Mar-a-Lago as a cash cow. Jared Kushner getting $4 billion from the Saudis 2 months after they leave office. Oh, I don't know. Did they just think he was an awesome guy? That's all going to happen again. But there is a lot of that happens on the other side too, and with other Republicans, and it's like it exposes it, right? And I'm one of the few people that will tell you that Donald Trump doesn't get a pass on those things, and those things are bad, so he should be held to account too. But this idea that we're just not going to challenge Joe Biden, we're not going to ask real questions about his health and fitness for the office, is a huge problem. And Joe Biden waiting till July instead of leaving in the previous November or the previous October and saying, you know what, I'm not running. I promised to serve one term, because he did. We need to have a primary, let people fight it out. They didn't want to do that because they didn't want, I think they knew all along they were vulnerable to Trump, because populism is popular. It's why it's called populism. And he is he's eating into their base with black voters, white working class voters. You're seeing this big political realignment where Bernie people are weirdly now supporting Trump, right? It is something that scared them and it bit them in the butt. And Joe Biden, I think, is carrying the biggest, his ego is carrying the biggest blame. Yeah, so I'd say, look, Project 2025, people are sending me and other friends messages like, should I take my money out of the bank because FDIC is going to be closed if I get Social Security when I retire? Which is a fun joke, and yes, there's going to be a haircut of 30% to everyone's Social Security when it runs out of money in 2030s. But Donald Trump is not going to touch entitlements or the Affordable Care Act or the FDIC or a lot of these different things. Not in my opinion. I think you take him seriously at his word, right? And he is so hesitant to touch these safety nets that people like that are popular. What he is hot on is immigration, protecting himself legally. Can a president pardon himself? He's going to pardon all the January 6th people. He's going to do the mass deportations in some form. What Trump did a lot of in the first term was he'd build like a mile of the wall, which is nothing, and then stand in front of him and go, see, I built the wall. How awesome am I? He wouldn't build the wall. Barack Obama built more wall at the southern border than Donald Trump in their administrations. And so does Donald Trump come in and find like the worst mass murderers, hunt those people down, deport them, and go, I'm doing mass deportations? Or does he do like they were doing at the end of the term, like finding the 65-year-old Iranian doctor who made a mistake on his paperwork and deporting him and his whole family? The size and scope, the exit polling that CNN did showed a clear majority of people not wanting these mass deportations, including Republicans, saying, look, they need a legal path to citizenship. They need a legal path to work here. And that's what the American people want. But they're not going to get it from Trump, and they're clearly not going to get it from the Democrats because they are pussies. But the reality is that Donald Trump is going to do either mass deportations in the way that he's talked about it, and we're going to take him seriously, and it's going to be widespread, and he's going to deport American citizens. The children of illegal immigrants are going to go, and they're American citizens, and they have no citizenship in Colombia or Guatemala. Like, where's the Supreme Court going to rule on deporting a U.S. citizen? I don't know. So I think it's going to really test America's courts and resolve when it comes to immigrants. And I think they're going to go so far that it's going to backfire. That pendulum will swing. And hopefully in the administration previously or after, you get some sort of reasonable path to citizenship where people can come and work and eventually after maybe 15 years can become voting citizens. But there's got to be something that's common sense, because what we have done by just putting up walls and saying nobody can come in and we're going to shut down chain migration and our decreasing attitude towards allowing any immigrants in. We have a quota system that was set in the LBJ era of 225,000 immigrants, but they could bring their families, which led to chain migration, which increased to millions of people come in because of family members. Does that get changed in the Congress, where they have the Senate and they have the House? If you're going to change immigration, you've got to do it through Congress. You can't do it through executive orders. This stuff is just not how it's supposed to be done. And the people's representative Congress is not going to assert itself, but it needs to. How far will he go? And the farther he goes, the more obscene it is, the more likely we're going to get immigration reform on the other side. But the problem is real human lives that are going to be affected by that. There's real human lives being affected at the border right now. What's happening, if you don't know, is our immigration policy, because it is so tight, it is, and our drug war has led to explosions of crime in these cities. The Mexican cartels have grown in power over the last 30 years and have now turned into smugglers of people. And so they'll take you, so these families will save up to come to America and be smuggled through the Darien Gap, and they will give them their life savings, and they'll take the dad and put him with a different family and put another dad with the wife and kids, and then they will ship them off so it looks like they're all families. But the dad has been told, if you don't do what we want you to do when you get to America, we're not going to give you your family back. We're going to kill your wife and kids. And so they come to America, they get in, and then they are enslaved to the cartels when they get here. It is really horrific and awful, and something needs to be done just from a humanitarian perspective. We have the power to greatly decrease, if not end, a lot of this slavery and take that power away. Are we going to do it? I don't know. Does America have the moral conscience to do it? I don't know. Tegan Goddard over at Political Wire wrote about this election, just to go on to some different thoughts. The massive disruption of our society caused by information technology has led to 11 change elections out of the last 13. The reason is that neither political party appears capable of addressing the concerns of voters. Trump has presided over a major political realignment of the GOP, and it's unclear if this can continue after he leads the stage. And he talks a little bit about podcasts coming in and being an important part of this. I think they definitely played a role. It gives you unfettered, unfiltered access to a candidate. The first time in 10 years I've seen Donald Trump be a human is with Theo Vaughn when he was talking about drugs. His brother, Theo, oh, cocaine, no, I've never heard of it. Dude, you were the king of New York in the 70s and the 80s. Stop, you've heard of cocaine. So Trump flipped Starr County, Texas, a majority Latino district on the Texas border for the first time in over 100 years. Hillary won the district in 2016 by 79 to 19%. Trump won it this year by 58 to 42, an incredible 76 percentage point swing. That has to be directly related to immigration. I don't know have enough information about that area to tell you exactly why. Trump's win obliterated the most pre-election assumptions. Exit polls show Harris lost support from both men and women, both college-educated and non-educated college-educated voters, both Arab American and Jewish voters, both Republican and Democratic voters, and both white and non-white voters. Popularity of ex-presidents seemed to grow after they leave office, and Trump likely benefited from that phenomenon. And also, to be fair to Harris, he says her performance mirrored what we are seeing around the world, with nearly all incumbents struggling in the post-pandemic world. And a lot of these countries are moving more nationalistic and radical. And I think it's a reasonable thing to say in a post-pandemic world. We saw how much power you have. I don't want you to have that power. I don't know that Trump is the guy to reduce that power. I'm just saying, if you're like an RFK Jr. fan, he is the warp speed guy. He did put Fauci in charge, and he did do the stimulus checks. But we'll see. We all trust him apparently now. Yeah, I'll just say this. Also, I guess we could talk about the Libertarians. Chase Oliver got 5th place, which after a long string of being 3rd place, that's an abysmal showing. What could have possibly happened? What changed? And I've got a tweet right now going viral because the guy who used to be the president of all libertarians, I forget his name now. You can go look at my Twitter and find it. But the libertarians can't keep doing the same thing over and over. Dude, you were the first Mises treasurer. So you were put in the takeover to do something different. The Libertarian Party did do something different, and it was put the Mises people in charge. And that led to 5th place in the presidential election. That led to the bankruptcy of the party. That led to half of the state affiliates, like 5 state affiliates suing each other because there's 2 political parties. It led to a chair who set up a fundraising scheme that takes Libertarian Party dollars and gives it to Donald Trump. Donald Trump, speaking from the stage at the convention recap video, had Chase Oliver in it for 4 seconds, 6 seconds, something ridiculous. It was a Trump ad. And you also had her go down to Mar-a-Lago, right? So she is under the illusion that they're going to get a cabinet position, that some Libertarian Party person will be a cabinet appointee. And I keep hearing from people like my friend Brian Nichols, which we will discuss when he comes on, that libertarians, for the first time ever, have a seat at the table. I think you're fools. I think you're believing the words of a man who has been sued 8,000 times, literally, for breaking his legal promises to other people. Donald Trump does not care about libertarians. The exchange is the libertarians had no political power, according to you guys. Even though Gary Johnson got 3.1% in the electoral vote and led to all this ballot access across the country and left the party in great shape with record affiliates and local organizations and candidates for the next 4 years running at the local level, which none of that exists now. That's all gone, right? So you failed on those accounts. You failed on the financial accounts. You had a convention where you had the majority of the people, of the delegates, and you failed to win your own convention, which led to the election of Chase Oliver, the exact opposite candidate you wanted. And then because you didn't get your way, you all shifted your goals to supporting Trump and getting a seat at the table instead of owning the complete failure that was the entire Mises project. And this is the key. You cannot ever be accountable if you're a right-wing populist. It is not your fault. Yes, you came in and you broke your brother's toy, but now you're mad at your brother for crying about it. Don't you tell on me. You're the one who broke the toy, right? You're the one who came in and said all of the work of all of the people who built an institution and organization that led to hundreds and thousands of candidates across the libertarians getting elected in Indiana and Ohio and Pennsylvania and all these different places, serving on their local as mayor of Topeka, Kansas, or on the city council of Topeka, Kansas, city council in Indianapolis. Like, all of that didn't matter, and that work wasn't important. That was stupid. You're better at this. You're going to do bold messaging. And what do we have to show for it? You have a Libertarian Party that is dead, that got 5th place in the election, and it is squarely on the Mises caucus's shoulders. And you can blame Chase Oliver all you want, but Chase Oliver had absolutely no party support. You go and talk to anybody that worked on that campaign, which we will talk to Hody, but it was night and day compared to Gary Johnson 2012-16 and Joe Jorgensen 2020. Joe Jorgensen had the support and like this constant fluidity between the two campaigns and the party and the local parties and, hey, I'm coming to town. Can you set up an event? Sure. Chase Oliver had none of that. It's like you can't not do your job as an LNC, support the opposition, and then go, I can't believe you failed. That is abuser behavior. That is very troubling if you're making that argument, because you are so married to being right that you can't see how wrong you are. And it makes absolutely no sense. I don't know what the future of the Libertarian. I think you also had a lot of different third parties. You had RFK, for instance, on the ballot here in Indiana, got 3%, tons of earned media, tons of name ID. Gary Johnson got 3% in 2016 because of all of the press that he did, all of the name ID. We've talked about that on the show before. 20 interviews a week around the country, multiple events, tons, 60 minutes segment. That's why he got 3%, is because he was a credible person that people wanted to vote for. The Mises guy, Michael Rechtenwald, was their choice, who is one of the most anti-Semitic pieces of garbage I've ever seen in my life. Thank God that guy didn't get the nomination. So chances of getting back to that Gary Johnson 3%, I don't know. That's definitely not possible in the Trump age. I don't think you can look at the conspiracy that this was a Republican plot to destroy the party and not buy into it at this point. There's got to be some credence to it, because the party, if you were being paid by someone like Steve Bannon to destroy the party from within, you wouldn't have done anything differently. I don't know how you rebuild that. I think the damage to the brand has been fatal. I think it was already on life support. I've said this on the show before, but back in 2013, I was working for the Advocates for Self-Government at the time. And I went to what was ISFL. It's now LibertyCon, but it's Students for Liberty's convention in Washington, D.C. And the Libertarian Party booth was sad. And none of these students were stopping by to talk to them. Everybody was so excited. It was the peak of the Ron Paul era. People were jazzed to be there. We were stopping at all the booths, taking all the stuff. And nobody wanted to talk to the Libertarian Party. And so I started just asking people, because I just left the job at the Libertarian Party and I was curious. And all of those college students told me, they're like, why would I join a political party? I want a good candidate. I want somebody that I can believe in. But I'm not going to join a political party. And the writing was on the wall then, this individualistic age that we live in, where people don't commit to an institution and they don't have loyalty to anything. The worst thing you can do to yourself is work at a job for more than 5 years. Because if you don't job hop, you're not going to raise your salary. You've got to move on. If you stay loyal to the company and invest your time and efforts into the institution, they're not going to pay you more. That loyalty is not returned to you. You have to job hop. And you have to look out for yourself. That's just the sad reality of it these days, right? And if you look at local parties here, the Republicans and the Democrats locally, there's no precinct committeeman. The Democrats rule this city with 70% of the vote. They don't have precinct committeemen anymore. People don't want to serve and do that party business. I mean, they do. It's just that it's not as full and it's not as energetic as it used to be. It's like a boring function that has to be happening. The Libertarian Party in the last 4 years cannot get meetings together. People don't meet. The beautiful thing about my time from 08 to 12 was it was so great to travel the state and the country and get to see people in their local counties stopping big projects. Like Rush County's Libertarian Party killed a $100 million project. And we had that multiple times throughout my 4 years there, where people just started showing up to county council meetings and canceling out major projects because they put a video camera up. And now all of a sudden everybody's being accountable. So all that's gone, right? That local accountability from a third party is gone. And people don't want to go and hang out with each other, and it's not cool. If you are part of the Libertarian Party now, you're a joke, you get made fun of. So people are not going to go be a part of something that's not cool, that's not fun. And the people making it not cool and not fun and mocking it are the people who were in the Mises caucus. Yeah. And all those people are supporting Donald Trump. So it's just no surprise that Heiss and Angela and all these people all ended up supporting Donald Trump. So I don't have any kind of positive note for the Libertarian Party. Jill Stein's candidacy was huge because of Gaza. In Gen Z, minority communities especially, Black, Muslim, Gaza cannot be overstated for why those people stayed home and didn't support her. The way I would put it and translate it to libertarians is the war in Iraq and why it drove so many of us from the Republican Party. It is a real game changer and motivator for people leaving the Democratic Party and sitting this election out. And so I think that rise in third party, a lot of libertarians obviously are Gaza people. Excuse me. My throat's getting dry. And those people, the Libertarian Party has been the anti-war party for so long and gave up some of its street cred to these other third parties. But yeah, obviously embarrassing for the Libertarian Party, and we know who to blame. We know whose fault it is. Those people will never be held accountable. The people who came in and said, we need to hold everybody accountable for Bill Weld. Accountability here and accountability there. And took over the party, and then they'll never be held accountable for destroying the parties. Why fight for it? What I would suggest to you, if you want to do community organizing, you ought to go to your local county council, city council meetings and start meeting people from across the different spectrums who agree with you. So when I was at the local radio station doing local news, I would go to a lot of these meetings and I would always find like-minded people. And we would disagree on things like abortion, immigration, all these other things, but we all agreed that money shouldn't be spent for that project and this politician's corrupt. And I would just recommend start with your local city council meeting. And don't worry about starting a Libertarian Party in your local area. Party can come later. I would suggest starting a podcast, starting a blog, starting like a local media outlet, and hold people accountable that way. Put a camera up at your local county council meeting and tell people what's going on. Live stream it to Facebook. You will not believe how nervous those people get. So become a party of one, at least initially, right? Just to start. And then maybe you meet a Democrat or Republican and you find some common cause in those parties, or maybe there is a strong Libertarian Party in your area that is worth it. But I think at least for the next 4 to 5 years, the Libertarian Party is going to have the leftovers of the Mises people. I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I think, but let's say Angela McArdle, this national chair, gets a job in the Trump administration, which I'm sure she's angling for. I could see that kind of being the final nail. You've already got Michael Heiss, the leader of the caucus. He's stepped out. You've got a lot of these Mises guys who became disillusioned with the caucus and they've moved on. There's a lot of the Prague side, if they even still exist, who are just exhausted. I think this period has worn out so many Libertarian Party people. The people that I talk to are just done, like on all these different sides, right? I'm tired of fighting with the left-leaning Libertarians. If you're a Mises guy, I'm tired of fighting the Mises people. If you're a centrist or a liberal libertarian, like you're just done with it. Like you don't need it. There's no benefit to it. It's too toxic online. And I don't know. I don't know what happens. I think you'll see people keep it on life support for a few years, and then something will happen that will lead to its resurrection at some point. You've got a party that has a lot of ballot access and institutional memory, mechanisms that are built that are not going to die. It will still exist, just not in its current form, not during the Trump. Too many libertarians see Donald Trump as a libertarian to support it, and too many of us who were involved in the past have moved on with our lives. I've got a family. I would not spend race weekend at a Libertarian Party convention. I turned down every interview for Libertarian candidates, except Don Rainwater. Don has pestered me about me not having him on for years, and I finally said, hey, I really want to get you on this year, and it never happened. I think he's got some family stuff, so I'm not taking it personally. No public apologies yet, Don. But, yeah, I've moved on, and I'll end it with this. Here's how I feel. I have moved on from my libertarian stage. We Are Libertarians as a brand I'm considering changing that, ending it, and just doing this podcast as a standalone show, just moving away from like the libertarian label, because I just don't want to be associated with so many libertarians now, because it's just become this left libertarian versus right libertarian fight, and I'm not either of you. I'm a Marshall Fritz, Ron Paul, like 2009 libertarian, and that doesn't exist. I feel like we're the last people left, and I just don't like. I'm growing my network here in Indianapolis, and I don't want to be the libertarian guy because they come and ask me about the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. I'm not down for that, right? And I also feel like I'm moving in more of a journalistic direction with the show, and I think it's like my goal was to get you to become a libertarian and become a Libertarian Party person 10 years ago, and I just don't care about that anymore. Like I want to see you affect the common good in your life and your community. So I've thought about retooling things. I haven't made up my mind fully, but discussing that, this, I think for me, as I've become more active in my local community, the tension that I feel in my family as a dad and husband, in interacting with people in my local community and my neighbors and different groups that I'm in and business and all that, is that tension between the common good and libertarianism is the desire to, how would I put it, like in this context? it's pure individualism. Like, let's take Ayn Rand as the purest form of this spectrum, where you are perfectly self-interested. Other people don't care about you at all. Look out for yourself, right? That's a very crude explanation of what she believes, but that's the gist of it. All the way to communitarians who say, look, we have the common good. Your individualism strikes at the heart and benefit of the community. And so there are times where you have to take a back seat in your personal liberty to achieve liberty for the community, right? Still within libertarian bounds. I'm trying to think of a good example. And what is your community, right? If you are a non-interventionist and you look at funding Ukraine, is all of humanity and the people of Ukraine your community, right? Some common good conservatives and libertarians argue we have to support Ukraine because if we don't, those people are going to die, right? And that's not in the common good interest. Look, I have to be real. There's evil in the world, and it's not my job to solve it, right? My job is to solve my local community's problems and to affect the common good here. There's a single mom that my wife is helping right now. We paid her rent this month. We are helping her find housing. Some libertarians have been awesome in helping that and donating, and she lost all of her possessions. She's getting evicted. We're collecting all those. That's what I can do, is find somebody that's hurting and needs some help and use my network for good. And I want more money in my pocket, so I have more money to give to people like this. That's in the common good interest, right? To have lower taxes, to have less government, to have less regulation. She's in a situation where HUD is basically, this person is renting an apartment illegally, a HUD apartment illegally, and is getting away with it and abusing this person. And so we're trying to get them out of that situation. That person is using the government to harm this person. I don't know. There's, I think, an interesting tension as you start to think more, how can my libertarianism become actually personal and local, as opposed to studying the news? Like Scott Jennings, and this, I think, is my final point. The news industrial complex. We love the fantasy football of it all. I do, for sure. I love the current events piece of it. I love arguing or learning about other people's opinions on tax policy or this fight or that fight. I love the drama of it all. And I think Trump has made it like this fun tabloidy thing in politics. But like, that is so far disconnected from people's real life. And I think that's part of why the media completely missed. The Puerto Rico joke, I don't know if I said it on the podcast, but maybe I posted about it. That always felt like one of those things that nobody actually cares about because they are broke, but that the media tries to repeat to make you think that people care about it. And I always go, man, I'm not Puerto Rican, so I don't know. If I were Puerto Rican, would I feel differently, right? With 225,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania care, maybe. But is that enough to really move the needle? And clearly it wasn't. But that's just one of those things where we get so caught up in arguing about, was this joke appropriate from a comedian? And it doesn't actually connect to people's actual lives. And I think once you start to get out into your community and connect to people where they're at, a lot of that stuff becomes superfluous. I've got to get some personal situations done before I can really do anything other than what I'm doing right now, which is talking into this microphone with you and podcasting with my friends. But I'd love to do some more like community-based stuff and help you figure out, okay, how does voting work? How does this thing? Have some great conversations with people. I just don't have the time until I can get a couple things done, but that's where I'm headed at least. So, all right, thanks for joining me. I hope that you are doing fine. I think if you're listening to this show, you were going to be disappointed no matter what. Somebody at work asked, so are you happy or sad about this? And I said, I'm a libertarian. I'm built for disappointment. I tweeted that, and the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire said, aren't these libertarians that are in charge? Like, this is the crazy. These libertarians who are in charge are so negative, and what a sad worldview. And it was a joke. You didn't recognize it as a joke because I didn't make it bigoted, but everybody else realized that it was a joke. And I think if you aren't disappointed, then you probably don't understand Donald Trump's relationship to power and how much he loves it, which is not good. All right, everybody. I thank you for listening, and we will have more conversation from different people in the coming weeks. I'm thinking about trying to do some sort of maybe live event if I can get it together and get everybody's schedules to match up, because I think that'd be fun, but we'll see. Okay. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening here on the Chris Spangle Show.